So let's hear about developing these virtual peer learning communities from the president of Bakke Graduate University, Dr. Brad Smith.
So when I was in college, I had a job that was a difficult job. It was selling Bibles door to door. It was in a rural area in the United States of a state called Georgia. And in most of those places, the house had fences in front of the house. And what did they have in the fence? A dog, right. And so to get to the person to start trying to sell your Bibles, you had to get past the dog. And so I went to a school called Texas A&M University in the United States that had a veterinarian college. And so before I went to this job, I went to the veterinarian college and I got coached on how to get past dogs. And I got very good at it, okay? And there's a trick to it because a dog can smell if you're afraid. They can actually smell it. And so you can't act like you're not afraid because the dog knows you're afraid, right? You've actually got to psych yourself up to not be afraid. And if you've actually somehow done that in your brain, the dog kind of goes, you're supposed to be here. And then they let me get to the front porch. And then when the person opens the door, they go, how did you get past the dog? And I say, let me tell you about our Bibles, okay? And so it was something that allowed me to be successful. However, we had a team. And every Sunday, we would go nearby, about a couple hour drive, for a motivational speech. And all the people that were selling Bibles door to door would go to Tennessee, which is several hours away, and we would have these amazing speakers. And they would just jump up and down, and they would have the greatest stories, and they would always bring people up front that had sold a lot. And most of them, I would say, with the phrase we used it, which I know is a cultural phrase, but they were wide polka dot people, meaning they wore big wide polka dot ties, and they were loud personalities, and they just were kind of those kind of people. But most of us were not that kind of people. And so what was interesting is we were supposed to get motivated and then get in the car to drive back, and we're supposed to be motivated to sell well. What happens, though, is people would start getting less and less motivated because they weren't like these people up front, okay? And so then we realized what was happening is selling Bibles door to door is a very difficult job. There's just no way around it. It's a hard job. And to have people sometimes meaning to motivate us, to get us excited, act like it wasn't a hard job, and perhaps for them it wasn't because they were like, ha, those kind of people, we realized that we were actually unmotivating people by not allowing them to talk about how difficult a job it was. And so what we did is we started changing things. So we didn't show up to all the meetings, which I know were bad. And instead we would find other people, and we started working on it. And I became the dog expert. And so I literally started training people so somebody would act like they're a dog. And we'd say, okay, now don't be afraid. How do you do it? How do you put your case in front? So I was the dog training person, and so I started training all of them on how to not be afraid of dogs, which helped everybody be better, right? We found somebody else that had the best jokes. He had the best jokes. And if you can tell a good joke when you're selling a Bible, people kind of relax and they go, that was a good joke. Come on in, and let's look at your Bibles. And we found different people had different skills. And we started, so those of us that were skipping the meetings actually started improving, where those that were going to the meetings, they started losing them because they were feeling there was too much they felt something, they were ashamed that they couldn't do it. So what we learned is when you're in a difficult job, you need to have support from other people. And it needs to be honest support, and it needs to have the freedom to say, this is a difficult role. And so one of the things that happens in peer learning, and also it helps you to have some people are gifted at certain parts of the fundraising task that you're not at, but you're gifted at parts that they're not at. And so when we talk about peer learning, let's go to the next slide and see what I've got here. So maybe not. It's up there. Okay, well, we'll just go without it. So for peer learning, what you're trying to do, one more. Okay, so here's the most important step you can do, is to gather. So if you had any one thing you would do after this, The most important thing to do is to gather around you a group of peers, a group of friends, a group of people that can help you. One more slide. So here's the list, and this is something I'd recommend that you do. Think about who could be on your team. Now, Zanette put together her team, and she said she asked 20 people that said no before she got one to say yes. But she said that one person has stayed with her for 22 years and has been critical for her. So just because you get no's on this doesn't mean that that's wrong. I get it your way here. So part of it is who prays for you. Who are some board members that want to help? You have some board members that don't want to help. We got that. But there are some that do, and they have ownership in it when it's part of the board. Who are people that like to write? Maybe you're a gifted writer, maybe you're not. There are some people that love to interview out of you what you're thinking and your stories and put it in writing. Who are people that like to manage projects, their goal for you, that really can help be on your team? And what happens is this is their gift. You're giving them an opportunity to do something that God made them to do. And so you're actually opening up a door for them to do their gift. Who are people that like to hold events? I'm one of those that is not good at events. So whenever I do an event, they're kind of boring. But no balloons, nothing exciting. And so I realized, keep me away from events, okay? You're real efficient, let's get them over with. No, there's other people that love to add the energy to it. Who are young leaders who like to communicate on social media? There are some people that would love to have the opportunity, who already are on social media, love to do videos, love to tell stories, and love to do that for you. And for them, it's an opportunity to do something that they're good at naturally, but they've never had an opportunity to do it in a way that makes a difference in a significant way. Who are people that like to do research? Because sometimes when you're looking for potential donors, you need to do research. Because if you ask a donor the wrong amount, let's say if you ask them way much more than they normally give, that's somewhat offensive, or at least it's shaming to them. If you ask for a lot less than what they normally give, then often you've missed an opportunity and they realize you didn't pay attention to who they were. Who are people that like to build and maintain relationships? They can be helpful to you to go along with you when you're talking to donors. And it may be that you can't have relationships at the level that you desire to truly have what a friend of ours, Rob Martin, calls a communion of giving and receiving. Because that's where you're trying to head. Most of these relationships may start off transactional. I'm asking you for something and you're going to give it to me, or hopefully. But later, as you hope to build what Gary has said and what Scott has said and what J. Paul said, there's a relationship that builds, but it sometimes takes time, especially as so you might be looking at other people that are good at relationships, could be volunteers, that can really be the primary relationship, and you're bringing them along and they enjoy doing it. God made them that way. And then who are mentors that have been fundraising for more years than you? So these are just some lists to think through, and I'd hope you'd be thinking through names of people that come to mind that you would invite to your team. Let's go to the next slide if you could. The other thing is, and this is where we get into the virtual networks, there are a lot of conversations right now happening on the internet. These are just a few of them, but these will open up the windows for you. One of them that Barbara's going to talk about, which I think is probably the most pervasive right now that I know of on the globe, is the Ministry Fundraising Network. That's the website. She's going to tell you a lot more about it and show you about it. That is the one-stop place to start not only getting access to resources, but starting to meet people and looking for where are those mentors that have been further along. So I have a mentor, a couple of mentors. One is Rob Martin, who has been fundraising for a lot longer than I have, and he is encouraging to me. Another one is a man named Brian Stiller, who's also been a fundraiser for a very long time. And we talk on a regular basis. We help each other, advise each other. I'd say most of the time they're helping me. But a lot of it is just having a mentor, and one of them lives in 4 hours flying away from me. Another one is like 5 hours flying. They don't have to be sitting next to you in a coffee shop. Lausanne Global Movements, Global Classroom. There's a big Lausanne conference happening here, obviously in Manila, starting on Tuesday night. They're building the Global Classroom that will have training and resources and people in it. Generosity Path is what J. Paul was talking about and Kay were talking about. It's an excellent resource, but also there's people that are in those conversations. There's a new thing, the WA Global Institute of Leadership, which will be coming online pretty soon. We have a certificate program. One of the things that we're going to do, that our director of the certificate program, sitting right over here, is she is taking the material from the Generosity Path, putting it in a program for fundraisers, okay? And so that you would go through a virtual journey of giving, which you heard about, to prepare you to then invite Generosity Path into your nation or into your area to help them to also to connect with donors. And it's a great combination of both training you but also engaging a different group. And that's something we can share more about. How can your peer learning community help you? First of all, specific prayer requests. And when I say good and bad news, you know when you're raising money, sometimes you actually do it by doing a prayer request. Please pray for the $10,000 we need for a new van, right? Which is kind of a silly way of doing it, but we do that, right? But you never write a newsletter that says, I am feeling depressed, and I've had so many people say no to me. Please pray for me because I'm depressed and I'm about to quit, okay? Who puts that in their fundraising newsletters, right? But that's reality. So having some people that you can have as peers and friends who are probably also in fundraising, who are also feel that way, hopefully not on the same day that you're feeling that way, it's actually important to have people that can pray with you in very honest ways. And encouragement. And encouragement doesn't happen, it's consistent conversations. You commit to meet and have a phone call once a week. Could be somebody in another part of the world. But the point is you commit to do that once a week and pray together, talk together. Some days you're like, I'm good, you're good, let's pray, we're all good. But there's other days you know that's coming, say on Wednesday, and it gives you something to look forward to say, I just need help today. But it's consistent is key. It's not necessarily only talk when you're having trouble or needing encouragement. Talk on a regular basis, and then you'll see that you'll build those relationships. And then accountability. Accountability on, am I staying focused? Do you know how you procrastinate the job that you feel less capable in, or you feel that's hardest? Sometimes people procrastinate on fundraising. It's very normal. That's normal. If you do that, you're normal, okay? And so the point is having somebody to say, last week you said that you were going to write these proposals. How did that go? And you go, I procrastinated again. Okay, let's give you grace. Let's pray for it. But I'm going to ask you into next week. There's something about that helps you in a peer learning to get focused. Ethical practices. I'm about to do this. What do you think about that? And getting some other people's opinions. Because there is some areas in fundraising, how you say things promotionally, okay, needs to be checked. Needs to have people that help you do that. And then character of trust. And I'm going to go through this next one real fast. This is just a character checklist. You notice you could do this by yourself. And this is written up by Rob Martin. And it says, am I honest? Am I? The bigger way to do that is to do that in a group of friends and say, am I? You report, and then you have conversations about that. The point is, when you build a peer learning network, people that are with you, to be able to start opening doors to ask these questions of yourself and of them, and they're asking questions of you. And there's another, and again, you can just take pictures, and there's another round of it too, I think. Okay, here's another one. These are just things to ask both yourself and others. And it's not meant to get 100% on every one of them. Every one of us, to some degree, says, you know what? I think I did exaggerate. I don't think I'm totally honest. Or there's times that I say, did I respond quickly to donors' requests? Sometimes we didn't. It's about being in relationship, because you're going to build trust with donors by having this kind of character. Having conversations with other people that are your peers helps you to basically do this job better. Let's go to one more slide. Next slide, okay? How's my attitude toward donors? You have a bad exposure, a bad experience, and you can get negative and cynical about donations and about your job. This is where people can help you and say, it's fine to vent to me, but we got to get over that. We've got to stop that bitterness. Do I procrastinate? Am I overly ambitious? These are just some questions that in a peer learning environment of other people, you're asking them because they're doing fundraising. They have the same temptations you do, and they're asking you. They have the same temptations. One more after this. And just some last things. And again, these are just some general questions you can look at in a peer learning environment. And it's not meant to get an A+ on all the questions. It's meant to open a conversation and start that. Let's go to the next one. So then you kind of have a thing you talk about with each other. This is not meant to be an individual journey between you and God. But think about it. You're in a conversation with other peers. Many of them are also doing fundraising. They have the same temptations you have. You're open with them about your struggles. They're open with you about your about your own struggles. And what's happening is you're building each other to have people of greater character, and you're having honest conversations of where you fall short, and they're giving you grace, and you're giving them grace, but you're also helping each other to improve. This is normal when you're in a difficult job that has a lot of temptations, that has a lot of awkward conversations and awkward feelings, to be with other people in these kind of conversations. Let's go to the next one. So another one is strategy planning and fundraising components. Let's go to the next one. So if you think about it, when you're doing your fundraising plan, there's a whole bunch of things that you have to put. Let's go one more after this if we could. And in those fundraising plans, just having people sit down with you and say, what would you add? How would you put this together? Let's go ahead and move through. I'm going to move through them kind of fast if you don't mind. So these are just different things that any fundraising plan will have. You have major donors you're thinking about, consistent small donors, small gift donors, church-based support, events, private foundations or corporation grants, government grants, social media and email-based fundraising, fees, and marketing support. Nobody does all those unless you're a really large corporation. But having peers to help you do it, and let's say you're very good at events, but you wanted to add something about private foundations. Being with peers to say, can you help me to know how to begin that process? And think about this. A foundation that has a lot of money, you think if you go to that foundation and then you help and you get money and you help somebody else go to that same foundation and get money, that you're not going to get money after that? It doesn't work that way. It actually, you've improved somebody else going, you've improved your own skill. It actually builds together for y'all to do it even better. And this is where it's sometimes hard because fundraisers compete with each other. And yet, when you have these relationships, you actually find that you're supporting each other, and we get rid of this scarcity mindset. There really is more money out there to be raised than we realize. And there are people out there that would love to give money in a relationship where there's a communion of giving and receiving. If you're helping somebody else to have those relationships and they're helping you, you're also benefiting the donor. It's not a scarcity mindset. It's a sense that God has given these resources and you're opening those up not only for your own organization but for others. So let's go one more. And then there are sometimes discernment and advice, review of proposals and joint projects. So I actually have other donors look at my proposals before I send them in. And they give me great advice. They say this, the best people, frankly, to give you advice are other donors, other people that are doing fundraising. And also I have people that serve on foundation boards or serve as foundation caseworkers, and sometimes they review my proposal before it goes to somebody else. And just again, so even in my peer learning network, I have people that are donors, or at least they're staff on donor foundations, and they're very helpful to me to help make sure that I'm communicating right. And the last thing about joint projects, you'd be amazed at sometimes when a donor is saying, rather than giving $5,000 here, $5,000 here, $5,000 here, to see two organizations coming and working together, and I can give $30,000 to these two organizations in a joint project that they are working with each other. Often that's very attractive to a donor because they realize their money is helping to multiply the impact of something. And even when they would say that instead of competing, they're collaborating. There's a group in Dallas that actually assembles what we would normally say with competing nonprofits. And in this exercise, they make one nonprofit basically sell the other nonprofit. So they say in this exercise, they have to go interview out of the other nonprofit that's their competitor and then present to the group a case for why they should give money to that nonprofit. And they're doing it for each other. It's amazing how all of a sudden at the end of that conversation, you're going, you've got a pretty good ministry. And you've got a pretty good ministry. And there's opening doors not only for trust to be built, but also for relationships to be built to say, is there a way potentially, rather than competing or duplicating, we can do a joint project? It's an interesting exercise sometimes to get together a team and bid with your competitors, okay, and then basically be in front of a group of people and share a commercial, a sales, a presentation about the people that you are supposedly your competitors. You'd be surprised. They may not be your competitors at all. So let me see what else we have up here. I think that's it. So kind of the bottom line is, my hope is, rather than walking away from this meeting, which you've had some major motivational talks and some really good content, but to say, yeah, I'm ready to do it. Remember, though, tomorrow you won't have that, okay? And so there's a sense in which you'll have that memory, but you won't have that energy and that, oh, yeah. This is a hard job. There are dogs, okay? Not maybe literal dogs, okay? But there are. And there's a lot of no's that occur. And what ends up happening is, being in a group of peers that are facing some of the same things is really going to be essential, if not the most important thing you can do to really sustain your joy and also your ability to be in this with joy and with effectiveness over the long haul. So if there's anything you could take away from today, I would say write down a list of people that you want to include in your peer learning community. And Barbara's going to talk about even how you can engage that in a global way. But there's no way you can do this job with joy and with effectiveness unless you have friends you're doing it with that are also in the same world and doing some of the same things. So that would be my challenge to you. So.